All right, that was a little weird intro.
That's terrible. What did you
It
do
kind
with
of
my
bugged.
song?
I just butchered one of the best podcast intros in the world.
I know. How come? I don't know. Is it your computer that's lagging?
I don't know. I don't know what
I
happened.
forgive you.
I'm in a goofy mood, so I'm guessing my computer's also in a goofy mood today.
Okay.
How's it going, Paul?
Good. You?
Good. I'm really good. All right, so you had a really interesting topic that you wanted to talk about, and it's actually I'm really happy you're bringing it up because it's something I've been thinking about myself, which is about diving deeper with your sales questions. So maybe you can explain it, but as I understand it, is like most salespeople, will ask questions, like why do you want to do more social media, or why, how's your plumbing, or like commercial building plumbing, or how's your accounts payable or something. And, usually the clients will answer, oh, well, and sometimes they're unhappy. You're like, okay, great. I have a solution for you. And I definitely know I'm guilty of this. It's kind of just hopping in right away into sales mode. As soon as you feel like the line budging a bit, I don't know about anything about fishing, so I'm going to stop the fishing analogies at that. Is that what you had in mind?
Yes.
Go.
Exactly what I had in mind. And it's interesting because, we can use a simple analogy that I think everyone can relate to. It's a B2C analogy, but I think it also applies to B2B about the in-depth. If you're selling skis or bicycles and someone comes in your store and says, I need a bicycle. And, the really bad salesperson says, okay, I've got the perfect bike for you. And then he, goes in this direction. And that's sort of what we all do a little bit in sales. Like the client will tell us, well, I'm having this problem with my CRM. I wish it did this and that. Hey, I've got the perfect solution for you. But the deep dive, well, first of all, the trick to deep diving is what I'm not going to say it right away. I'll say it after. So the idea of the deep dive is to find out what the real motivation of the individual is to potentially buy your product, buy your service, and really understand what it'll do for them rather than just the surface problem that it fixes. So if it's some like valve in an industry that you're selling, and the valve fixes this problem, that problem, that's great. But if you jump into that too quickly, you might be missing all these other opportunities that you're not talking about.
Okay.
So, and I wouldn't call it just, it's not a trick, but there's a way if you train yourself to ask open questions. Usually, if you don't allow yourself to jump into solution mode too quickly, your open questions will lead to a lot more of the motivation that the buyer has and the real reason as to why they're buying this product or this service, or they want to fix it. And you might even help them discover something.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Well, we're going to give a real analogy, but yes, ask your questions.
Yeah. So there's two things that I kind of think about. Is there one? Let's say we stick to your B2C example in the bike store, right? Like, is it because I'm guessing there's maybe a lot of reasons, but what I would see is because, well, ultimately we're just selling bikes, right? So if the real reason you want to do this is that you want to stay in shape and or not stay in shape, but get into shape, and you like biking, like if you dive too deep, it's almost like I don't know what else to give you other than my bike, right? You know what I mean? And so how does diving deeper really help you? I mean, if somebody coming in and saying, I want a CRM, or I want a bike, or, I need new plumbing for my high rise. I don't know how you buy plumbing, but whatever. Isn't that enough?
Sure, it's enough, but it doesn't make you a great salesperson. It doesn't make you develop the kind of relationship that will keep that person coming. Now in B2C, you might just sell one bike and not see him for 10 years, but let's assume you're selling bicycles to a school. So it's B2B. But you're selling them a lot of bicycles for the, International School of Cycling. And the thing is, if you walk into a store if you call me at my office, if I end up talking to you, whether it's, high-end B2B or even simple B2C, if I don't make a connection with that salesperson, then I'm just buying a product. It's almost, it can almost be perceived as a commodity, right? To a certain extent, because most people have competition. Very rarely is there a new product on the block that has no competition. So there's a bunch of different bike companies out there. There's a bunch of, very high-end companies that do very precise measuring equipment. There's some very high-end companies that do valves. There's very high-end companies that do SaaS. There's usually most people have competition. Very rarely do you not, right?
Yeah.
So what's going to differentiate you from the others is you being consultative. You being consultative is all about asking questions. It's all about really finding out what drives the person in front of you, what they want to buy. We'll even put Simon Sinek in there, give him a little star. What you want to buy is the bicycle or the plumbing part. How you're going to buy it, or what's it going to do, how is it going to help you, and then why. The why, that's what you're looking for, the true motivation, what's deep down in there, right?
Yeah, and you could argue, and you were saying before, a bike store might not see you for 10 years, but the reality is it's not necessarily true, right? Because the tires are going to burst. Maybe you'll want to do a tune-up every year and stuff like that. And there's other bike stores that wish you could bring your tune-up. You could buy your tire tubes on Amazon. So I think although you're not going to you might not sell them another bike for 5 or 10 years, you're still going to see them or make money from them or have them as a customer for a while.
Yes. But remember I'm selling it to the International School of Cycling here. So I'm making it B2B, and he might have to buy more bicycles, but he might even be paying more for your service. But it's like, hey, this guy really took the time to understand what I really need. That's why people choose someone over someone else in, let's say, any kind of sale where there's, all things being equal, all things are equal. And I'll give you a very specific example of that. So if I go in and you're trying to buy a bicycle from me, you're the bicycle buyer from the International School of Bicycles, and you say to me, hey, Paul, I want a bike. I want to buy 10 bikes for the school. We're going to be buying 10 bikes a year, always upgrading. And I say, okay, what's your budget? You say, well, 10 bikes, $10,000, we're going to spend that every year. Okay, here, Fab, here are the 10 bikes, you can get for $1,000. This one's blue, this one's red. They're all the best bikes you can get for $1,000. So I don't know anything about you, right? I just basically handed over what you need, and we don't really have a relationship. But the first thing when you come in, you say, hey, Paul, I want to buy 10 bikes from you. Say, okay, why are you looking to buy 10 bikes, right?
Yeah.
Why are you looking to buy 10 bikes? Hey, Paul, I want to buy 10 bikes from you. Say, okay, are you listening to our stream?
What's that?
Are you listening to our stream while you're doing the stream? You have to answer me now, Fab. So why do you want to buy 10 bikes from me, Fab?
Because, we would like to provide bikes to the community, and there's some people that can't afford it. So while some people can bring their bikes, we'd like to provide bikes to the community, and everybody who can't afford a bike will have access to a bike. Oh,
that's very nice. Have you guys just started doing this now? Can you tell me more about the program?
So actually it's something that started, we started almost from the beginning. It just used to be kind of more of a bike exchange, not bike exchange, but people could drop off their old bikes, donate their old bikes type of thing, which has worked well, but the program is still doing well. It's just sometimes, the bike's not always the best quality, and we don't always have time to fix them and whatnot. And sometimes it's just not the right size. So we'd like to have a few bikes that are maybe different sizes and stuff like that, so that we always have something available for whoever needs it. Okay. And what's your ultimate goal? Well, our organization is really there to, obviously we organize bike tours or whatnot, but for companies, but we just want to our goal is just to make sure that people are stay active. That's really our motto, and I think biking is such a great way of doing that, and that's been proven. And so we just want to take away any excuse possible for not doing it. Okay.
So look, if we just stop it there, I made you go away for. I didn't sell you any bike yet. I just asked you what your goals were. I deep dove into the subject,
Yep.
and you need to think a lot. Like in this role play, you couldn't just give yes or no answers, right?
No.
In a role play, if you're doing a role play, if you're practicing, and the person you're practicing with says, "Oh man, you made me sweat, work hard," then you're doing your job because they have to think, and that's what you want to do. Your client, you want to make them think. Okay, yeah, what is it that I'm trying to achieve here? Because and the more open-ended questions my questions are, the more the person's going to talk because they can't, well, they can if they're really rude, but usually they won't just say yes or no to an open-ended question. You know, if you say, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is you're trying to do? And they say no, then, you know, that could be pretty rude. But so the idea there is you use open questions to go further. So even if someone's trying to buy a SaaS from you, hey, let's say again, you're the client and you say to me, hey, Paul, you know, I find my reps are not using the CRM properly. I think it's the interface.
Right.
You know, then I might say, well, tell me more about that interface. You know?
Yeah.
So it's that simple. It's continuing to ask the questions because in your mind often it's, I can sell now.
I got that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you need that because I got that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I can sell now. I can go right into it. And then you stop asking questions and you go into sell mode.
Yeah.
Right. And it does a few things is you're going to start talking a lot more in your client, which is not a good thing. And you might just only solve one problem. There might be a bunch of other things. Maybe this guy needs a bunch of new seats for the bikes he already has. Maybe he needs a place to store his bikes in the winter. Maybe he wants to expand his bike donation program all across the country. You know, you can't, if you write down all these questions, you're going to seem like you're leading an interrogation, right? And the guy's going to go, well, this guy's a nut bar and it's going to take you forever to figure out what it is he's trying to guess.
Right.
But then if you ask these questions, you're going to get there.
Yep.
You know, I don't know if I've ever did we ever do this on the podcast? We've done so many. Did we ever do the 5 questions there? I
don't know. It sounds familiar, but I don't have it top of mind.
The guessing game, you know, where I say, okay, you gotta think of what I'm thinking of. You gotta try to guess what I'm thinking of. I give you all these questions. You can only answer yes or no. So, you know, 20 questions. Oh, what color is the, you know, what are you looking at? So, for example, let's say you think of something right now. Think of something in your circle, and I try to guess them. Yeah. You can only say yes or no to me. Well, that's what closed questions are like. You're basically throwing. You're guessing, you're throwing stuff at your prospect and you're trying to guess. Hey, Fab, do you want to expand your stores across the country for this international bike thing? No. Are you hoping to have new female singers every Saturday night on the corner of your bike store? No. Right. Whereas if I just say, hey, Fab, what are your goals? Once you've bought these bikes, what are your goals? You're going to tell me. And I don't go into selling mode right away. Just shut up and listen. And I just get you to tell me more. It's hard because we're all the same, Fab. Yeah. I'm like that. I teach you stuff and I forget to do it.
No, and I mean, look, there's so many things that are popping up right now because, like, I asked you at the onset, like, why go deeper? If you sell CRMs and you need CRMs, like, here we go. Let's just go into, like, submission and not submission. like send a proposal and let's just go back and forth and negotiate and let's try to get that working, get that on the books. But there's so many things that are popping up is because, you know, like diving deeper, like when you don't dive deeper, right? Like you're putting so much pressure on the customer to understand what they're looking for. And I know we've talked about this before, right? But it's like, yeah, I need a CRM, but the reality is like, even no matter how much research I've done and this and that, and obviously the bigger the ticket item, probably the more research the person has done. But
I like patient better.
The person has done, you're right. Like it's just, but you're still putting a lot of onus on them for being like, well, what is really the difference between Salesforce and HubSpot CRM or HubSpot and Zoho? Like, you know, I've done all this research and I think I know, but ultimately I'm not 100% sure, right?
Let's assume for now, okay, just for this exercise, I know it's not the case, but let's assume Zoho, Salesforce, and HubSpot are all the same. They just have different colors, okay? Even then, like, what do you do? Because to the client, like, what's he buying? He's going to buy your capability, your expertise to help him make the right solution.
Right, exactly. And so, and it brings me to something else. And I saw something on LinkedIn about like adding value, right? And everybody talks about adding value, and your content needs to have that. Obviously, it's more in a marketing context, but on the sales context, like value, like how do I sell value? And the reality is, like you said it, right? It's the value that you bring, especially in an environment where products are probably relatively similar. Like, yes, there's a lot of differences between Salesforce and HubSpot CRM, but ultimately they're CRMs, and their goal is the same. So what's the real value added is what you bring to the table as a salesperson, right? If I feel you understand my needs and my problems and my desires, well, I'm going to trust your solution a lot more than if you're asking me to compare which one is best for me.
Exactly. And it's interesting because if you're selling something that's very technical, very complex, you obviously need to have that expertise. Okay. And that I will never say that you don't need the expertise, but if we put that expertise aside a second, we assume that you have the expertise.
Yes.
Your capacity to connect with your prospect or client probably the single thing that'll guarantee that you get that deal. Because all things being equal, they're buying from an individual with the details that serve them best.
Right.
And basically it's not feature selling. It's being a consultant sitting next to the person and helping him make that decision. Right.
And that's the value you bring, right? Like that is the value. It's like, because in a lot of things, and especially, once in a while you'll have a product or a service that's completely different and better than what your competition has. But most of the time, especially, and it's not even, doesn't have to be real, right? And that's maybe the marketing side of things that come in is the perception of your customer, right? If your customer perceives you as being relatively similar, even if in your mind you're like, well, we use AI to rah, 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 the customer's like, yeah, but it's still a way of tracking my deals or my opportunities, right? Like, I don't care. And not that I don't care. It's like, oh, cool. But you're ultimately still doing the same thing, And so it's the perception, and you're kind of destroying that perception by you being somebody who's willing to take the time to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, and that's a case where the client does know about CRMs, let's say, but there's the other case too where the client maybe needs some education on what it is that your product could maybe help them bring. And then that's where you need to go deep dive to understand what their real goals are, right?
Yeah.
If you say to me, well, what are you trying to achieve? Why do you need a CRM? Well, I want to create some organization in my team, and I want them to better be prepared before they go on sales calls. I want my numbers to go up. And then you keep asking, well, what do you mean by your numbers going up? Well, I'm trying to double our numbers in the next year. Okay. And why do you feel the CRM is going to do this for you? Well, the CRM is a magic pill that can do anything and everything. It'll turn every salesperson into a perfect salesperson. And that's too, you got to be realistic in the things that you're pushing forward or the things that you're talking about. But ultimately, you need to let the client talk to you about his or her expectations.
Right.
And his or her objectives. And how is your product going to help them achieve their objectives? And that's what deep diving is. Deep diving is finding out their objectives, not just feature selling. Right? A lot of people still just feature sell. CRM does this, does that. Our product does this, does that. It's great. It'll help you. Well, that's not helping me as a client. You're just selling me the product I'm looking for. You're not becoming a partner. You're not becoming someone I can trust. You're selling me something I'm looking for. You're just a guy telling me, I need 10 bikes, $10,000, here you go, rather than being the guy that understands why you're getting those 10 bikes and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I like what you said, which is kind of like, you're kind of trying to identify, I don't know exactly how you said it. It sounded better when you said it, but like you're trying to identify their objections, right? So
objectives.
Their what?
Objectives, not objections.
Objectives. But in a way, I heard objections, and I like that, because in a way, by diving deeper, when the
objections, that way, you're right. You're right.
You're like, Okay, but like you say, oh, it's too expensive, right? But you're saying you were increasing your sales, right? Or you wanted to increase your sales. So you're like, you're tooling yourself, or
You're
you're,
canceling their objections before they come up. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right.
yeah,
Because if
interesting.
you ask the right questions right away and you really deep dive, well, then they're telling you why they're going to buy rather than you later on trying to figure out why they're not going to buy right away.
And so, although this might be a simple question, I feel it might be a little loaded. Not loaded, but like maybe more difficult. Is so, how do you deep dive? Like, why do salespeople or consultants or freelancers why do we tend to stop at the, oh, they have a problem I can solve, let's solve it. So why do I stop, and how do I move past that?
Well, if you ask your friend in a real life situation,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask your friend, hey, do you want to go to dinner? Right? Your friend will probably just say yes, and then you get in the car and you drive to the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
You don't say to your friend, well, why do you want to go to dinner?
Mm.
Well, because I'm hungry. Why do you think you're hungry? Because I haven't eaten. Why haven't you eaten? Well, I had a really busy day today and didn't have a chance to eat. That's what a salesperson does. Right?
Yeah.
So you don't do this in regular life.
Mm.
When you turn to your wife and you say, hey, honey, kids are asleep. Want to go somewhere else?
What is always
What's your wife going to say? Yes or no? And if she says yes, you're not going to say, oh, why would you like to go and engage in romantic lovemaking?
why does it always have to turn to that with salespeople?
Because people understand that. Because people understand that. They understand that relationship.
Gotcha.
In nature, in life,
Yeah.
we don't deep dive. We just get the answer we want, and then we sell our product.
Yeah.
Going to the restaurant with your buddy, whether it's going to play golf, whether it's having sex with your wife, it's just there it goes. But as a salesperson, you have to act more like a psychologist, right? So when you go to your psychologist and you're depressed because your girlfriend left you and your dog died and you lost your car, and the psychologist won't just say, oh, and he'll say, why are you depressed? You'll say, well, okay, all right, I get it. So here, take these pills and go home. No. First of all, psychologists shouldn't be giving you pills. The psychologist is going to ask you, well, tell me a little bit more why that bothers you.
Yeah.
And then that's deep diving. And when you deep dive, then the patient, in this case, will open up. And this is what you're trying to do with sales. You're trying to get the person to open up to really find out why it is that they want to get this thing or why this thing might be good. Now, as a salesperson, it's kind of tricky because they're not coming to you all the time to ask you. Sometimes you're calling them, you're asking them questions, and you're trying to convince them why they want to buy from you. You're doing two things. You're doing that. We've done that before. The conversation starter. Boom, you get the person interested, and then you're asking them more questions to see how your solutions might help them. But ultimately, you're finding out about their issues, about their problems, about their opportunities, and to see if eventually you can help them solve these things. So that's why you have to deep dive. That's why you really have to develop that trust and expertise in the thing that you're trying to sell. Bicycles, software. You're just trying to see you're trying to develop the sales relationship so that this person sees you as an expert that can help them achieve their objectives and overcome their objections.
So, fine. So I get it. We're not used to it. And so we need to hone and train that part of our brains or whatever. Psychologists study for a long time to get used to it and stuff like that. Like we don't. So I get that it's something that we need to train. So how can I, let's say tomorrow morning, I'm able to get somebody on the phone. How do I switch from everyday fab to sales fab so that I can ask, not asking how I can switch, but more, how can I switch from that instinct, I don't know what other word to use, of just accepting whatever the answer is to, okay, but there's more here.
I'm so happy you say that. And at first, you have to use a trick. First, it's a tactic. And what's the trick in your tactic? You've got to tell with yourself, not with your client. And the trick and the tactic with yourself is, whenever I want to ask a closed question that is yes or no, or whenever I want to describe my product, I need to ask myself, first of all, it's two parts. First thing is, how can I ask this question in an open-ended fashion? So that there's no yes or no answer or not just a number, right?
Right.
How can I do that? And I got to keep asking those open-ended questions till there's no more, right?
Right.
That's the first thing, right? The second thing is I've got to resist selling till I found out till I have a whole landscape of what's going on. I've got to resist selling.
Yeah.
Or resist just pushing a price or pushing a deal. And the hardest thing is sometimes it's very obvious. Hey, Paul, I've got $10,000. I want to buy 5 bikes. And you're thinking, wow, it's the end of the month. I'm trying to sell these 5 bikes. And, I would have been happy at $1,500 and he's willing to give me $2,000. Whoa! Bikes for you. Here they are. And that's, I'm giving extreme examples, of course, but we're often that way. We're like, oh, I see an opportunity, right? And humans, we see opportunities everywhere, right? You see a guy's house that's not painted, and you're going to walk up to it and say, hey, I'm going to give you a great deal on a paint job. But, maybe the guy's selling his house and he doesn't care about the paint job. Maybe he's going to be tearing the house down next week. And he's going to be building a whole new house that's going to need paint inside and outside. Here you are just trying to convince him that he should paint his front door, or windows. That's the benefit of deep diving. But we don't do that naturally. We do it a little bit with our kids sometimes when we ask them, well, why do you want to go to school? Why do you want to be a ballerina? Oh, yeah. And then what are you hoping for? And you keep doing, and that's interesting. But often we go right into sales mode. And trust me, I was guilty of this, and I'm still guilty of this sometimes for, the 30 years of my sales career.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. It's not an easy thing to do, particularly when you acquire an expertise in a certain field.
Right.
We tend to go into blab mode very quickly, like I'm doing right now.
Well, it's safe. There's a safety element to it, right? Like,
okay.
And and I think you alluded to that at some point, probably when we were talking about the sales process. But you're kind of almost afraid that you're gonna kind of hit a wall at some point and realize like you don't have the right tool for them or the right service for them, and so you kind of rather go into sales mode and try to say that, well, at least I've tried to sell them, even if it doesn't close, as opposed to just being like, this is the first call, or let's say the discovery call, a longer call, and right away I know this is just not a good fit. I guess it could be scary for a salesperson to.
Well, it's only scary if you like. It's funny. I was just coaching a bunch of people before. Okay, they're a bunch of seasoned salespeople. Like these guys have been doing their job for some of them as long as I've been in sales, which is since 1932. But since like the early mid 90s. So they're really good at what they do. And this morning, I was having a conversation with them saying, you guys need to start calling higher up the executives. We've had this conversation. You should always call them high up in the company as you can. And I was getting a little bit of resistance, but they're great salespeople. They just hadn't gone there. So sometimes you just need to be opened up and say, okay, I'm going to try something different.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go a little further. And if you allow yourself to deep dive, to ask those questions, it doesn't matter which level you're talking to, they're doing the talking.
Yeah.
The other thing too is when you ask open-ended questions, you're almost guaranteeing the success of them talking at least twice as much as you do.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I mean, I think, you're talking about tricks before, and, all of our sales process episodes are a little mind blowing for me. Obviously I'm not, I've never worked at that level in the sales, like within sales. But that's another trick, right? Is if you set yourself up for like, okay, like my goal for this next call or whatever is not to send a proposal, is to get an answer to these 10, 15 questions, whatever number of questions you've established were important to find an answer for, right? And so if you set yourself that as a goal, like your goal is not to close or send a proposal, is to, well, there's these 10 things I absolutely need to know to see if it makes sense for us to do business together. And if I enter the call with that frame of mind of like, this is what I need to know, I'm maybe less inclined to like, great, I'll send you a proposal.
Yes. Now they should be more directions in specific things, because specific things too, sorry, I have to make another caveat here. It's okay to have a list of things that you want to know, right?
Yeah.
But if you just go, if I just have my list of things, so Fab, how much do you want to spend?
Yeah.
What color would you like them? When would you like them to have delivered by?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, but those are not the type of questions that we talked about during the sales process episodes. You know,
I
right?
I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that our listeners realize that we're not just saying to have a list of. There might be things you
features.
want answered, but
Yeah,
remember that the things you want answered have to come from open-ended questions, because if
right.
not, you're turning it into an interrogation, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're right, and that's a good clarification to add, because you might, unfortunately for you, listener, have not listened to all the sales process episodes. But you're right. Like the questions that we said are important are open ended, and they are geared towards diving deeper into what you need as a salesperson, what you need to really understand this person, right? The deep dive. I mean, those questions or those answers that you're looking for are really geared towards diving deeper.
Let's do it. Let's do a little mini fun thing now.
All right.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay?
Awesome.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, Fab, I know you bought a house a few years ago.
Yes.
Okay. And why did you buy that house?
Wanted to start a family, and it made more sense to go directly from a house to condo to then house.
Okay. And why did you choose that neighborhood?
Honestly, we looked at a lot of different properties in a lot of different neighborhoods, and we really liked the property. We didn't know the neighborhood as much. It's more the property that we really enjoyed.
Okay. And what is it about the property that you enjoyed?
I mean, it was just, what we needed. It was kind of like move-in ready, but still gave us potential to improve it as we wanted.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, you mean the property? You mean the actual house, or you mean the land?
The house. Sorry, yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what is it that the house had that you liked?
Like I said, we wanted something that was move-in ready, because we were both busy. We didn't have time to do a complete gutting operation and stuff like that. So we wanted it to be move-in ready, but everything was well put in place, but at the same time gave a lot of opportunity to improve as we had time, budget, and stuff like that.
Okay, and how important was the budget in your decision making process?
Well, obviously it's important. We had a pre-approval. We had a pre-approval before before the house hunting started, so it had to fit within that budget. And I had, within the pre-approval, I had set myself a certain percentage of what I actually wanted to spend. So obviously it's very important.
Okay, so all I did there was make you talk with open-ended questions, right?
Right.
And I made you think a lot, because I saw you going, "Oh, geez, oh yeah, it's true." Well, let's say I was going to now try to get you to have your house appraised because I might be able to sell it for more, right? Let's say I'm a real estate broker. Well, right away you're saying, "Well, Paul's asking the right questions, right?" And then if I said to you, "So, Fab, when you say the property was the right fit for you, can you tell me more? Like, was it the amount of bedrooms? Like, I might lead you a little bit because you're being a little vague there, right? So now I can maybe lead you. Was it the bedrooms, the garage, the size, the color? Can you tell me a little bit more? What is it about the property that was right for you?"
Yeah. Oh, for real? You're asking? Okay. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, we bought the house almost 10 years ago, so I don't always remember.
Make it up!
Make it up. Fine. I'm too honest. We liked that it was bright. There were a lot of big windows, and it was it's well thought out. It's very efficient in terms of how they use the space. So we were able to put stuff where we needed it to, and it gave us enough rooms for ours, and then for an event, growing family. So.
And how important was your neighborhood? Like where it is? Like, is it close to parks? Is it close to schools?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we didn't spend that much. Like, for me, my big criteria was it has to be close to public transit, because at the time I would work downtown, and I didn't want to drive downtown, so it had to be convenient. Like, that was a big criteria for neighborhood. But other than that, obviously we kind of look at the neighborhood. We had a general idea of what the neighborhood was like, but that was the number one criteria in terms of neighborhood was, proximity to public transit, and and then after the fact, when we really liked the house, then we did more digging as to like we even contacted like the police station to see like what kind of crime was happening in this area, stuff like that, But it was more kind of an after thought than the first thought.
Okay. So how did you feel there as a guy who I was asking questions to? Did you feel I was interested, one, and did I make you talk a lot?
Yeah, obviously. Well, you definitely made me talk a lot, even though I had to invent stuff.
And what was the trick there? The trick was I was just asking you open-ended questions. Every question I had was, tell me more about that. Was this important to you? Why was it important to you? And if I said, is this important? So I would say, well, like, this seems to be important to you. Can you tell me more? Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the trick. That's the trick to deep diving. It's just having open-ended questions. It's not some magic trick that this salesperson is way better than the other. It's just that you listen, you concentrate on what the person's telling you. You don't just think of your solution. You keep going in the conversation to find out more about the person.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you. Can I tell you a little anecdote?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, you were going to say something. Go for it.
No. I mean, I was going to go and move on to the next thing. I mean, we do have to stop shortly, but I just wanted to know, like, I think one challenge that I know I personally encounter, and maybe I'm too pragmatic, but it's kind of like these open-ended questions, these deep dive and all that sound good on paper, on video in this case, or on audio. But, there's kind of this, like, where's this bringing me to, right? Like, it kind of feels like we're just chatting, and I get the value and I get the relationship building, but it's almost like, okay, let's get to it type of thing. Let's get to the CRM thing that you need.
Well, okay. So here I was a real estate broker, right? So I'm asking you questions as to what's important to you and why you bought that house, right? So obviously, I'm going to come in and you've said to me, or I've had the discussion already, that you're thinking of, moving up, right? Mm. So I should ask you all these questions to really understand more about you.
Yeah.
And now it's going to help. And you say, okay, Paul's really taking the time to understand what it is that's important to us.
Yeah.
So in a CRM situation, would be like, why do you want a CRM? Then I say, okay, why are you looking for CRM? Okay, what's the issue that you're really worried about?
Yeah.
What is it that you're really looking to do? And then the same conversation will ensue. It'll go deep.
Yeah.
As deep as it needs to go to understand the real problem, right?
Yeah.
And listen, if you do open-ended questions, you'll know when it's the end. When the guy says to you, the CRM is going to help me, buy 10 different places across the world. Then what happens? Well, then I'm the happiest guy in the world and I keep doing it again. Okay. Then you've gotten to the end of your conversation. Okay.
Right.
And then, and then you might say, all right. And then eventually you might talk, okay, more about the team, how many people are on the team, what is it you do? Then you get into the more tactical stuff, but you want to know the ultimate motivation first. And you do that ththrough open-ended questions.
Gotcha. So that's really interesting because it's like, that's it. It almost feels like open-ended questions feels so open, but I know you, for example, when you have your, let's call them discovery calls, you set yourself like an hour, or you mentioned that some of them last like 90 minutes or something. Like it's also about, don't stick like a discovery call between two meetings for 15 minutes, like it's also like, give yourself, okay, it's at 2 p.m. but I have nothing until 5. So, if
it depends on the value of what you're selling. Like, I'm selling solutions and relationships that'll last sometimes 2 years, right?
Right.
If you're selling something that's more widgety, you might have a different approach, right?
Yeah.
But yes, you're discovering you're the psychologist of whatever it is you're trying to sell, right? So,
right.
Listen, I'm not going to start talking to you about your real estate if I'm trying to sell you, I don't know, a car. Mm-hmm. So here's the anecdote I wanted to tell you.
Right.
When I started sales, I did it for one reason. 2 reasons.
Yeah.
I hated the idea of sitting in an office. I hated it. Okay. And I also hated the idea of 9 to 5. I said, I don't want to go in at 9 and clock out at 5. So I said, okay, what's going to give me that freedom? Sales. I'm also a really curious person. I've always been, and that's, it's helped me, but it's not something I've developed. I've just always been curious. I'm just a curious person. So when I started in sales and I knew nothing, I was like 23 years old. I literally knew nothing about anything, but I was really curious. So I would go sit down with clients And I'd ask him a bazillion questions, not because I was a great sales guy, because I was curious. But what I realized then, and I remember someone had told me back then, when you sit down in the decision maker's office, look around, look at the pictures, because back then we didn't have internet. Well, 1990, well, it was starting, but no one was using the internet. And, and I'd look on the wall and I'd talk to them about their kids or whatever. And I was just curious. So often I would end up having these really long conversations that had nothing to do with the product I was selling. But it would develop that relationship, and then bang, I'd get into the questions, and the person was way more likely to answer me. So that's my little anecdote, that I was just naturally curious. And if you're not curious and you're not interested, it's going to show, and you're going to suck. I'm sorry. You can't pretend to be curious. So you got to have that true curiosity. And if not, you're not really made for sales. You got to be curious and want to help people. And if you don't have that, then you're just going to be, some dude or some dudette selling stuff that people don't need.
Gotcha. Great. Trust the process. That's the big takeaway. Ask your questions. Trust the process. Trust that you'll get there.
Yeah, open-ended questions.
And I mean, we talked about this during the sales process series or whatever, is that, if at the end of your conversation, you realize let's say you're a real estate agent and you realize, I still don't have information about this. Like, you can still call up the person and kind of like, hey, I just have a couple more questions for you. It doesn't have to be rigid. Like, we had 45 minutes discovery call. Crap, I didn't ask everything I wanted. Now I'm screwed. I have to anticipate or assume stuff. Just pick up the phone again.
I mean, I remember, Fab, I was made for sales. I remember in my early 20s, I would meet people wherever, and I would just ask them questions. Oh, what do you do? And oh, yeah, that's cool. And I'd keep going because I liked that. I thought it was interesting. I found out about people. I found that fascinating.
Yeah. Finding
out about what people did and why they did it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
If you don't have that real interest and all you have is, I want to sell this, it's going to show. And that person's going to see, he's just trying to sell me his product. If you're really lucky, they need your product and they'll buy it. But
yeah. Awesome.
Should we wrap this up?
We should.
Did I talk too much? You have that look on your face like I talked too much.
No, I have the look on my face like, I have to go soon.
But you have something very soon in 5 minutes?
5 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Fab.
Thanks, Paul. That was an amazing episode.